Welcome to another edition of Longevity Kitchen with me, Julie Gibson Clark. As you can tell, we are not cooking again tonight. Tonight we are going to tackle something many of you had put in the comment sections over several videos. I had received many DMs, and I actually get this question a lot in my personal life as well, which is how did you, I'm going to use the term break free from sugar. I will use the term sugar addiction tonight. I just want to, put this caveat on that. I fully recognize that being hooked on sugar is not the same thing as being hooked on more dangerous addictive substances, okay? Those things, we all know they destroy families, they ruin lives. We're not talking about that kind of stuff, but I do think that there is an addictive quality to sugar that all of us recognize to a certain degree. I mean, the people that, like myself, I felt like it had control over me. I didn't have control over it. And after about 30 years, it took 30 years of, trial and error and failing, and succeeding but failing to finally feel like now I do have the control over it. I still enjoy it. I haven't gotten rid of it completely, but I'm the one in control. I'm in the driver's seat. So I thought tonight we would talk a little bit about how to do that. And I'll just share with you along the way kind of some of the things I learned, but let me give you the roadmap based on my 30 years of learning. Okay, I just want to offer, I gave you the caveat on addiction. I also want to offer one other caveat, which is, and I think is quite obvious, I am not a medical professional. I am not a scientist. I am not a researcher. So I'm going to talk about some supplements as well as some behaviors that I did, fasting being one of them, that I think it's really important you talk with your doctor or your medical professional, somebody who handles your care about first. And I'll make sure to mention that again. It's really, really important. Some things are pretty hard on the body, and you just want to make sure you're going to be okay. All right, so we're going to talk about those things in just a second. I thought before we got into how to get off sugar, let's go over why. Besides the obvious, which is it's empty calories. Although I will say this, one weird little thing that's happening around the internet nowadays, I don't know if you've seen this high sugar diet. I'll include a link in the show notes to a researcher and scientist that's done some really great reporting on this and can educate you much better than I can. Because when I hear this and I've seen what he talked about, this, my gut feeling, pun intended, 100%, was like, I just can't imagine, that could be good for you in the long run. In fact, it seems like we've done decades-long research on high sugar diets, and it really hasn't ended well. Now we're here as a society. So let's go over some of the reasons why sugar can be bad for you. So one of them is called AGEs, or Advanced Glycation End Products. And this is when sugar enters your body, it binds to certain proteins, causing your cells to age from the inside out. So we're talking cellular aging, stiffening of the arteries in the skin, so like leading to wrinkles like more quickly in life, as well as chronic inflammation in your brain, your kidneys, and your eyes. And then there's also, I don't know if you've heard about sugar being linked to Alzheimer's, but it being like, they call it diabetes of the brain, but the AGEs are part of that process. So Alzheimer's, kidney disease, and eye problems are all related to these advanced glycation end products, which are a product of sugar binding to proteins in your body. So that's kind of like not very fun, not cool. There is also the longevity factor. Multiple studies show that high sugar diets are linked to shorter lifespans. So sugar increases your oxidative stress, damages your mitochondria, those are your cellular powerhouses, as well as disrupts the hormones that help your body repair itself. Not very good. I always kind of think like, so sugar demands insulin to deal with the blood sugar in your body, and insulin is a hormone. I want you to try to imagine that your hormones in your body work much like a symphony. And if sugar is like the tuba player, or the insulin is like the tuba player, it's maybe playing a little too much and a little too loud all the time. It kind of throws the whole symphony off. So we want to kind of, okay to have it sometimes, but not all the time. Another reason is for your heart health. Even if you're at a normal rate, sugar harms your cardiovascular system by raising your triglycerides, increasing your bad cholesterol, and elevating your blood pressure, all major risk factors for heart attack and stroke. Not a good thing. And then last but not least, and there are many, I should preface this, there are many reasons sugar is bad for you, but these are kind of the 4 that I feel like stand in the way of a long health span in your life. So gut health, this is the last thing, gut health crisis. Now, there's probably a bunch of scientific ways to explain this. And I want you to imagine you've got a good army and you've got a bad army. And anybody who has had a yeast infection or a candida infection or thrush, or maybe you've had a baby who's had that, you understand that's kind of like the bad guys getting out of control, the bad bugs. And sugar feeds those bad bugs. So anytime you're eating sugar, you are feeding these unhealthy bacteria in your body, and your body, you know, in the bacteria of the gut, there's good bacteria making like great micronutrients for you, doing all kinds of good things, but they can't do their job if they're overwhelmed with these bad bugs, these bad sugar bugs. And I used to explain it to my son, like, you know, you've got these 2 guys at war and you really want to weaken the other side as much as possible, that being the ones that are fed by sugar. So, and in fact, I think that this is my hunch. Again, not a scientist. I have never looked down I can't even pass a chemistry class, kids. Okay, so please. But this is just my hunch based on my experience that it is the bacterial portion of it is the thing that drives that addiction or that constant thinking about sugar, because now we know about the gut-brain connection. And so if your gut is off and the sugar bugs are dying off, they're going to do everything they can to survive. And if that somehow, you know, is like, hey, makes you start thinking about ice cream and cookies and, ooh, wouldn't a brownie be great right now? Hey, how about you make some cookie dough and enjoy that? Or how about some frosting? I just have a feeling that that is where we are going to find a lot of help, is by balancing out that bacteria. I also think that that's what leads to making this a very difficult time. When you first get off sugar, you are going to feel a lot of desire for it, but you're also, some people get headaches. I know at times I've gotten headaches, or I just feel kind of like awful, like I'm getting the flu. I really think it has something to do with that bacteria. I have no scientific backing on that. It's just my gut feeling, okay? So this is kind of what I think is a good solution. I can tell you, well, let me back up like a little bit more about my story. So I learned that sugar was bad for you in high school. I was about 17 years old, and my best friend, dear friend Brooke, had a book called Sugar Blues. And I was skimming through the book just shocked, like, what? It could be this bad? You know, like, really? It's just sugar. How is it bad for you? And so it's a great book. I will put a link to it in the show notes. That was the first time that I was alerted that kind of sugar isn't good for you, and kept trying to kind of, you know, part ways, be in control of it, but I never really could win the battle. I'd go off of it for, you know, a week or 2. And then somehow somebody would have a party, or I'd have to go to a client meeting, or something would happen, and then all of a sudden sugar's back in my life again. And it was, again, that thing like, oh, why don't you go and get, you deserve a treat, or why don't you go get some ice cream? And it was really every night before I went to bed, after I put my son to bed, that was like my time to take care of myself. And for whatever reason, that meant like ice cream in bed, watching TV. Not a good habit. I don't recommend it, especially sugar right before bed. Talk about all the longevity factor, your heart health, your ages, your gut health. I mean, horrible for you. So let's not do that. So at some point, I finally, this was in 2017, so 30 years later from when I read that first book, Sugar Blues, I read Jason Fung's Fasting, and I experimented with that. And I also, what came out at the end of that year was a book by Gary Taubes called the case against sugar. I will link both of these in the show notes. And the two together, just, I think it was just like the final nail in the coffin for sugar. Again, I had been experimenting, but really never stuck. And when I started experimenting with fasting, and I could go like one day first, and at that first time I was water fasting only. Then I would go kind of like, let me do 2 days, 3 days. I was able to get up to 4. Again, I'm not saying you should do this. What I am illustrating the point though is that I think by fasting, it killed off a lot of those bad bugs in my microbiome, because when I returned, and it increases your insulin sensitivity as well. So when I would come off of a fast and now it was time to eat again, I found even like fruit and anything sweet it was like very intense, more intense in my mouth than it had ever been. And so it was a lot easier to kind of stay away from it. I still ate sugar, but it was a lot easier to stay away from it after a fast. And then, you know, normal life would continue, and then eventually the sugar would be back in on the regular. But the other thing was reading the case against sugar. And it just made me so angry and empowered, and really see how as a society we got into this mess. And I just became very adamant that I was going to get off sugar. And so this is what I think really, really works. Let's get into it. Okay, so how are we going to do this? What's your plan, right? Well, that is what we're going to talk about. So the first thing I'm going to ask you to do is come up with your why. And we did talk about some, 4 of the kind of scarier reasons, or the things that, could have you fear sugar. And I don't really ever want to be like a clickbait kind of show, but I do think that fear can be a very powerful motivator, so long as the fear is real, so long as that's a fact. So for every fearful why you come up with, I'm going to ask you to come up with a positive. So think about something that there's something you're running from. For me, it's like, the ages and Alzheimer's, like that really scares me a lot. So that's something I'm running from. But what I'm running to is a healthier, longer lifespan, to be here for my son, my family. Hopefully there'll be grandkids, maybe to travel the world, all the things that I want to do with that healthy lifespan. That's what I'm running to. And so these are that's my why. I want you to come up with a strong why. And if you can't come up with anything, that's okay. It will come to you, because there's a reason that you're watching this video. There's a reason that you want to get off sugar. Eventually it'll come to you. So I just think in your head, there's probably a negative, many negative reasons why you want to come off of sugar. That's the stuff you're running from. But try to be thinking about the stuff you're running to, because that can be sometimes more powerful, certainly, because there are going to be times, just like anything we do in life, we're going to fail. You're going to set out on the journey, and then you're going to take a little bit of a wrong turn. It's okay. You're going to just get right back on track. You got the rest of your life to figure this out. This isn't 8 weeks and, succeed or fail. This is just the rest of your life. So, just get back up on the horse and start again. So know your why, okay? That's a really, really, probably the most important thing. The other thing I want you to do is to define your goal. You need to figure out, do you want complete lifetime elimination from sugar, or do you just want to reduce it, or do you want to, my plan, my goal, which I think I've reached, is I wanted total elimination. I wanted elimination for a whole year. It was one of my New Year's resolutions in 2023. I did make it all the way through mid-August, and then somebody had a bundt cake, and well, I had to try it. so I suppose in that way I failed, but honestly, from that point on, I have been in control of sugar. And so while I still have sugar in my life, it's only something I do in non-habit forming situations. So like, it's really not allowed in my house so much. I mean, I wouldn't bring home candy or pastries, and I really don't bake that much anymore unless it's for my son. So like, the other rule is, if I bake it, I don't eat it. And I will have it on vacation, because I know I'm not going to be back in that situation again. So those are sort of my rules and my goals. Many of those have just developed over time, but ultimately the big picture was I wanted to eliminate it, and then I wanted to have it in my life, but something that I was totally in control of. And that's where we are now. So define your goal. What do you, in 20 years from now, what do you want your relationship with sugar to look like? Okay. The other thing I want you to do is to educate yourself. I want you to read the labels of the foods that you have in your refrigerator, in your pantry, every time you reach for something at the store. Even things that are not, considered, I would say, maybe ultra processed food can sometimes still have, the elusive cane sugar. I will put a list of all the different things that are called sugar in the show notes, but I was shocked, of course we always, we hear sucrose and dextrose and anything with the ose. I think many of us know that that's going to be a sugar, but the other one that was kind of tricky to me was dextrin and maltodextrin. I actually, for the longest time, never knew what that was, but apparently that's sugar. So there's cane sugar. There's also fruit juice concentrate. So obviously, some of these things might be better for you than others, but when you're in that kind of really trying to balance out the microbiome, the unhealthy microbiome, I think it's probably important that you keep that stuff to as minimal as possible, because it's still feeding the wrong guys, okay? So educate yourself. The next step, I want you to examine your habits. So for me, I knew the two places where sugar was very common was for morning. I tended to want baked goods in the morning, and in the evening before bed, I tended to want something cold and sweet before bed. I probably part of living in Arizona, but even in the winter, I would still want that. So those were the two places I knew I had to be extra careful, and I needed to come up with a better plan. What can I do around these, what can I do for the evening time that would help me? Are there some substitutes I could come up with? So you just really kind of track, when is it? Are you craving it immediately after you eat? Or are you oh, I always want dessert? Just so you can anticipate when that's going to be, and then we're going to come up with some substitutes and some actions for you. Okay, so just learn your patterns. Then we want to look at what's your approach. How are you going to do this? Some people, myself included, I had to go cold turkey. It was okay, I'd faffed about with a week here and a week there, and eventually I was okay, I'm just going to go off for a whole year. A whole year, no sugar. Again, I made it 8.5 months, and I think that was effective. That was plenty. But for some people, they do better when they just gradually decrease it. You have to decide what works for you. I'm sure that, or maybe even try both approaches. Try the gradual approach, and if that's just not working, maybe eventually just go cold turkey. You know yourself better, but figure out what your approach is. Okay, so last but not least, you need to create a plan. And the first thing I want you to do is come up with some substitute sweets. And if you're having any trouble with that, I want you to think there's 3 kind of sweets I think people like. It's just my observation as a cook. They like either the vanilla creamy stuff and caramel, kind of vanilla creamy caramel people. There's the chocolate people that just like anything and everything chocolate. And then there's the fruity kind of sour candy people. And so the fruity sour candy people, you want to obviously, fruit is a great easy substitute. It usually satisfies, especially sour, the blueberries when they're kind of sour, or the strawberries that are still a little bit sour, not so sweet. Those are great substitutes. Even a green apple, Granny Smith apple is great. And then you've got the chocolate people. And I would say dark chocolate is a good substitute, but I think it's really easy to overeat that. And so instead, I would encourage you to be making some chocolate avocado mousse. If you've never made that, I'll include a link in the show notes. And then for the vanilla people, the vanilla caramel, which is my thing. Again, I found the frozen blueberries actually to kind of taste like a cold creamy treat a little bit, but also if you've ever frozen a banana and whipped it up in your blender, that can really satisfy. And if you don't have that, you can just freeze banana slices and eat them. They have that kind of cold creamy texture. That's one thing. I also found that macaroons were really good, especially if the thing you crave is cookies and cakes. So a sugar-free sugar-free macaroon is a wonderful substitute. Okay, so that's part of creating the plan. We're coming up with substitutes in the actual sugar department. But then I also want you to come up with substitutes of things that you can do instead. So in other words, like, I know that I always crave it at breakfast. Okay, well then I know I need to plan breakfast. I need to get in and out of that kitchen as quickly as possible, so there's, you know, the less opportunity for kind of faffing about and somehow something sugary ends up in my mouth. So I wanted to uncouple that. And in the evening, it was, I felt like if I could uncouple the TV, then I'm changing what I'm doing. And so then it became about reading, doing crossword puzzles, sometimes Sudoku, whatever you say. So whatever you're doing currently when you're having your sugary treat, you need to stop doing that at that specific time when you crave it. Come up with something else. I want you to come up with a friend that you can call, and if you feel like you don't have a friend that you can talk to, then get out your journal and be the best friend to yourself that you possibly can be. Some people find it helpful to have an accountability partner. I find it very helpful for when I'm trying to up my workouts and when I'm really trying to, do a more hardcore diet. I didn't seem to need it so much in the sugar stuff. I found that journaling was like plenty, but every once in a while too, it was just planning a call with a friend. So like if you know, hey, every Saturday night, I put the kids to bed and this is when I crave sugar, you know what, maybe make a plan to call another friend, another mom friend who's struggling with this, and maybe you guys could work together. Just come up with something creative to just get yourself out of that little spiral that happens. Okay, so that is it. That's how you want to create your plan. And then last but not least, I wanted to go over some supplements that I think were freaking game changers. Okay, so let's go over that. Okay, you guys, so let's talk about some supplements. The first one I'm going to talk about, I personally did not find that it worked on any sort of level, but Chromium Picolinate I see in everywhere I turn. It's very well researched. 200 to 1,000 micrograms daily improves your blood glucose and insulin sensitivity, and it can balance your blood sugar and reduce cravings according to the research. Again, in my personal experience, I really it didn't do anything for me, but I'm listing it here because it's everywhere and it's worth at least trying. I don't remember it being very expensive. They did say the form that you need to get is the Chromium Picolinate form because that was the most bioavailable. The next supplement is Berberine, and this is one where I think it's important you do talk to your medical professionals, maybe have some blood work done, because it really effectively lowers your blood sugar. They even call it like poor man's metformin. So you can have up to like 1.5 grams a day, but I would start very, very small. You can get it in 250 milligrams. That's what I started with, 250 milligrams twice a day, and then eventually moved up to 500 milligrams twice a day. So one at my breakfast meal and one at my dinner meal. And that really helped balance out kind of the sugar roller coaster. And I think so how it works is it activates your AMPK enzyme and improves your glucose metabolism. And it does something to the microbiome too. Again, that's just my own personal 2 cents because I could just feel it working immediately. It just really helped. Over maybe the period of maybe 2 to 3 weeks, I found I had a real reduction in sugar cravings. So I don't know if it was completely just the berberine, but it seemed to be making a difference. And note, I will take that for maybe 3 to 4 months, and then I'll take like a month off. I just feel like it's important that you don't stay on that stuff forever. But again, it's worth talking with your doctor about. Make sure you've had some blood work. You don't really want to put yourself into some kind of low blood sugar spiral. So it is that effective. All right, so the next thing we're going to talk about is L-glutamine. So most of the literature that I was reading said 500 to 1,000 milligrams 2 to 3 times a day, which is what I have done in the past when I was really trying to get off sugar. So it provides like quick brain food, and reducing your sugar cravings. And I was doing it like between my meals or like in the evening. I would have it like before that sugar craving would hit, and same thing in the morning, first thing in the morning. Now, because I think it was Rhonda Patrick was talking about taking like 5 grams a day first thing in the morning. And so that's what I'm actually doing now. I just take it first thing in the morning every day, experimenting to see. And sure enough, it really just kills any interest in sugar. So that's another one to try. The other thing that is just more in support of like your daily energy is magnesium. I think that's obvious. I've said everywhere. I'm pretty magnesium deficient, and so I take a lot of magnesium a day. The recommended dose is like 200 to 400. I think the US RDA on magnesium is like 400 to 600 a day. So this says that it supports your glucose metabolism and reduces stress-induced cravings. Magnesium glycinate, very good. I'll scream that to the ends of the earth. Magnesium threonate or glycinate before bed really do help you sleep, which, you know, obviously being better rested helps you crave less food, period, during the day, but especially sugar. When you're tired, you do want to reach for extra energy, and your brain will drive you, I think, towards like those sugary snacks. So if you want to sleep well, start with magnesium threonate or glycinate at night. Also having different magnesium forms throughout the day. I really love, there's magnesium malate in the Novos that I take every day. I don't want this thing to sound like an ad, but I do, you know, that's one of the forms of magnesium I take, as well as magnesium taurate. And in fact, that said, Novos has this Novos Vital. I haven't really talked about it very much because I don't think there's really anything like measurable that I can do to say, is it really working? But it's got a lot of different antioxidants in here. It's got zeaxanthin, rutin, nattokinase, lutein, and inulin, and raw apple cider vinegar. And they're these little gummies. And in fact, I have to actually hide them from my son because he ate like way too many of them one day. I was like, dude, those are vitamins. So you can have 4 a day, and they are like, if you're a sour candy person, this is like a punch in the mouth. It's, I have to like, So I'll put a link there. I don't want this thing to be a sales, you know, kind of video, but they really do work if you're having a little sugar craving. I mean, they're just like, it's so sour, but so good if you need that kind of sugary thing. If you don't like sour things, you might struggle with this one. So the other things that, you know, are just in support, I would say probiotics, again, going back to balancing that gut microbiome. I know that when I first started taking probiotics, I was having like flu-like symptoms. So I just think that there's something that happens with the, you know, when your microbiome's imbalanced and those bad guys start dying off, like they don't leave quietly. So a good probiotic is very good. It'll improve your gut health, obviously, and hopefully helping with those that drive or those cravings to eat sugar. Zinc can be very good for insulin function and glucose metabolism as well. So 8 to 15 milligrams of zinc, 8 to 15 milligrams of zinc daily is what this is telling me. I think that's about what I take. And then last but not least, I think is alpha lipoic acid. And that one, 300 to 600 milligrams daily. I just would be careful because it can be very effective in creating insulin sensitivity and your glucose uptake. But taking both berberine and alpha lipoic acid together might actually be so effective it could really do some damage. So again, this is where it helps to work with a healthcare professional. And if you are looking for somebody to work with, I've said it again, and I have zero affiliation with them, but the Institute for Functional Medicine, you just get on ifm.org and look for people that have some functional medicine training. Naturopaths can be really helpful here too. But just somebody that, you know, if you're just really kind of questioning, what do I do? But I would say the two biggest movers for me, L-glutamine and berberine. And if, you know, you don't want to talk with the doctor, then maybe skip the berberine and just try the L-glutamine and maybe try the Chromium Picolinate. It's not very expensive. And those two really, the glutamine very, very much helped with the sugar cravings. And then obviously having a plan, having some substitutes, having my why in place, and all the things we talked about. All right, let's sum up what we talked about tonight as far as how to get off sugar. First thing you need to do is know your why. Ideally, you know a negative and a positive, at least one positive. Define your goal. So do you want complete elimination, or do you want gradual, just a reduction, okay? Educate yourself, read labels, find all the tricky little ingredients. Not that you guys eat a lot of processed foods, but just educate yourself, okay, and where sugar appears in the non-obvious things. Examine your habits. Figure out right now when you are eating sugar, when you're craving sugar, and work around that and prepare for that. So, and what kind of approach do you want? Do you want to go cold turkey right off the bat, or do you want a gradual reduction, or a gradual reduction and then cold turkey? You figure out what works best for you. And then last but not least, create a plan. And within that plan, you want to come up with some substitute sweets. You want to come up with some activities that you can do at those times when you typically crave sugar that are different than the activities you're doing now. Then you also want to, if you can, have a friend to call when the cravings hit, and or an accountability partner. Those can be really helpful. And just remember, when you first start getting off sugar, these cravings are very powerful. And if you were like me, they were something I had had for, decades. So it wasn't gonna end in 8 weeks, but I just want you to know that when you have these cravings, or you're feeling really crappy because you're getting off of the sugar, it does pass. Eventually you will win, so long as you stay off of it. So sometimes it's just a matter of just go to bed, just take a bath, go to bed, do something else, go to bed, wake up the next morning, and wow, the sugar craving is gone. Not to say you won't face it again that next night, but eventually, weeks later, it's gone. I can tell you without a doubt now, I get into bed and I don't even think about eating sugar anymore. But it took a while. So I just, this is the plan, this is the way forward. Just know that it's not something that, is easily attainable in a few weeks' time. Somebody who tells you can get off sugar in 4 weeks, I would say maybe, but I think you're going to get right back on. So, plan on this taking 4 months. 4 months, 16 months, something like that, but just take your time and move forward very smartly. All right, so I have one last request. Why don't you guys put in the comments some of the sugary things that you crave, especially if there's something that you're having trouble finding a substitute for. I'd love to help you if I can. And who knows, maybe it'll be another edition of Longevity Kitchen where we come up with, some recipes to make for all the sugary treat thingies that you like, that I like as well. And we can do kind of a sugar-free episode. So feel free to put those in the comments. If you're not comfortable doing that, you can DM me over on Instagram at juliegibsonclark.com. And then, as the YouTubers say these days, smash that like button. No, I am going to ask you, if you like the video, to, hit the like button, subscribe, and we will see you again next week. Thanks again.